Morning, everybody. I first wanted to start off by saying I bought the new Robin Hitchcock album, which is just called Robin Hitchcock. It's great. Go get it. My favorite Robin Hitchcock albums are, let's see, in not any particular order, Ole Tarantula, Jewels for Sophia, Star for Bram, which I think is more or less kind of a double album released as two single albums, and Propeller Time, also a good one. This new one is a lot like my favorites and real good stuff. So go get that. Now on to the next topic. I'd like to talk to you about religious experiences because I watched a couple of videos this morning about different people's so-called religious experiences, and I kind of wanted to see if I could wrap my head around those and make one of my own. Now, when people talk about religious experiences, usually they're talking about what in the Zen tradition is traditionally called Satori or Kensho, or sometimes opening experience, sometimes enlightenment experience. There's different names for this kind of phenomenon. And it is not restricted to the Zen tradition. There are Christians who have these experiences, Muslims who have these experiences, non-religious people often have them too. So it's kind of a human experience which is common to a lot of cultures and traditions, but is relatively rare. And because it's rare, it's not well understood. Nobody's really taken the time to examine it in any detail, and those who have kind of, for my money, fucked it all up. Because it's usually treated as an object. So anytime you have an experience of any kind, that experience eventually becomes an object of memory. So you relate to it as that. But the experience itself and the memory of that experience, the member berries of it, aren't really the same thing. But you can still talk in terms of the memory of the experience. It's like sex and porn are not the same, or sex or your loss of virginity and your memory of your loss of virginity are two different things, but obviously they're related. In my own case, these things that one tends to call religious experiences, for me, happened in a cluster sometime in the late 1990s, mostly. The one some of you are probably familiar with is the one that I wrote about in two of my books, in Hardcore Zen and There Is No God and He Is Always With You. In those, I talked about an experience walking to work one day where everything just sort of went woof, and my whole world was turned upside down. This, in retrospect, was part of a series of kind of similar things. So before it happened, there were sort of mini versions of it that were not quite as spectacular, but were interesting and weird, and were informative, I would suppose you could say. But the one where I crossed the bridge was really a mind blower. So those of you who've read the books have heard this before, but basically I was on my way to work at Tsuburaya Productions. I would have to go from Soshigaya Okura Station. No, I'm sorry. Seijo Gakuen Maya Station, not Soshigaya Okura. On the Odakyu Express train, get off at Seijo Gakuen Maya Station, and then walk this kind of weird route that somebody who worked there had shown me that got you to Tsuburaya Productions, which my best guess maybe a mile away. And at one point, the last little bit of the journey had you crossing this little bridge over a river called the Sengawa, and tiny I was going to say footbridge, but it's not really. Cars could go over this bridge because that's the way Japan is, and they have these crazy tiny bridges that are just big enough for a car to go across, and cars go across them. They probably would be ruled unsafe for vehicles in America, but that's the way it goes. My memory is I got halfway across that bridge, and then all of a sudden, for no reason I can fathom, the whole world kind of blew up. And or maybe I could say it turned upside down. Like everything I thought was real was suddenly revealed to be not quite as real as I thought, but still real. And this other thing opened up. And this other thing seemed to be a connection with the mind of God, if I want to put it in really gross terms like that. It was as if I wasn't just seeing out of these two eyes, but I was seeing out of every eye in the universe for all of time simultaneously. And you'd think that if that happened, you could ask me like, well, was Joan of Arc really a blonde or something, like that? And I'd be like, yes, because I saw out of Joan of Arc's eyes. But it didn't work like that. I was still me, with my still same history and everything else. It just suddenly, this connection opened up where this me was revealed to be part of something much grander. But it didn't really give this me, this Brad Warner, access to all of that. It was just as if suddenly the perspective switched. And probably in terms of physical time as measured by a watch, which I got in a flea market in Munich, solar powered. It probably lasted a few seconds, not even a minute. If you cross that bridge, I'm sure it doesn't even take you a minute to cross the bridge because it's tiny. And by the time I was on the end of the bridge, it was more or less over. But it didn't feel like that. It felt more like all of time, like from the Big Bang on or whatever, maybe before the Big Bang, was sort of compressed and available for a little bit of Earth time, if we can call it that, and then kind of gone. And the memory of it isn't very clear. I don't think the memory of it was ever very clear because I don't think it fits into this brain. It somehow is beyond this brain. But there was no sense at all of this might have been a hallucination, or this might have been a mistake, or I might have thought it happened, but it didn't really happen, or any of that kind of stuff. There was no need for me to go and confirm this with anybody, because it would be like, and I've said this in books, it would be like dropping a bowling ball on your foot and then going and having somebody confirm that you dropped a bowling ball on your foot. You don't need somebody to confirm that. It was absolutely as real as if you dropped a real bowling ball, blop, on your real foot, and from then on, your foot was mashed flat for the rest of your life. And you could never forget that this happened, because there would always be this reminder in the form of your mashed up foot, right? So there's no way I can deny this anymore. But as I trudge on through the years, I move further and further away from that experience. And to be honest with you, I've had experiences since then, but nothing quite as mind-blowing. And I think the reason for that may be that you only lose your virginity once. You may have a lot of sex. You may be Hugh Hefner and having sex with 14 women every day or whatever he has. But you lose your virginity once, even if you're Hugh Hefner, and that experience is going to be different from any other. There was also a little bit of like the experience kind of freaked me out. Not in the sense that it scared me or anything, but it really threw me for a loop, and I didn't really crave going back there. it isn't a place you can stay. I think, based on that experience and the other experiences I've had, I think that there might be certain people who try to stay in that experience forever. And when I encounter those people, not usually in person, but in the form of books and movies and things, or sometimes there's documentaries about them, they seem to me to be making a kind of mistake, because they're trying to live in this thing that you can't really live in. The only person I've encountered like that, I won't name by name, but he's still around, and I've only met him once. And it seemed like he seemed damaged to me. Although he had lots of followers who really loved and worshipped him and wanted to bask in the glow of whatever this thing he was living in was. But to me, he looked damaged, like he had retreated too far into it and become something like a snail taken out of its shell, and just barely living because there were people surrounding him who, because they loved him so much, would agree to be his shell for him. But I felt like he was abdicating his responsibility to be his own shell. And I thought, I don't really want to go that direction with this. So I think these experiences happen sometimes. Sometimes there's meditation and things leading up to it, but it's difficult to say exactly what the relationship between the meditation and the experience is. In my own case, I feel that if I hadn't done all that zazen, maybe the experience wouldn't have happened, but maybe it would have. And if it had happened without meditation coming before it, and without a lot of intellectual study of what these experiences are like, and intellectual study of people like Dogen and others — I'm pointing to where the Dogen books would be on my shelf if you could see them — without that study, the experience might have gone a completely different way. This is why I feel like when I read about famous psychotics like, what's that guy? Charles Manson, people like that, if you read them, they sometimes sound like they might have had an experience similar to what I did, but they had no context for it, and so the ego jumps in like one of those catcher machines and grabs the experience and says, this is mine now, and because it's mine, I'm going to relate to it as a thing I have, and I'm going to tell people about it, and I'm going to show it to them and show them the scar that I have from it, and they're all going to love me, and I'm going to use it. I think that might happen. Of course, I have no evidence of it. So that's my little video about religious experiences. Hope you enjoyed it. If you want more of this stuff, subscribe to my channel or like it. That I've found is useful. I've got Patreon, whatever the hell it is, page down there below. You can donate to PayPal. You can donate to a blog you can look at, books you can buy if you want to, get the merch and everything. It helps me, it helps me buy Robin Hitchcock albums and pay the rent on this spacious, not very spacious actually, this apartment I have. So thanks a lot. Bye. See you later.